In this video, I want to talk about determining whether an expression has balanced parentheses, whether a string has balanced parentheses. So here's an example of what I mean by balanced parentheses. It just means that every open parenthesis closes at some point. So for example, this expression here has balanced parentheses. If you add one more pair here, that's balanced. You could add multiple nested parentheses like that, and that would be balanced as well. Here you have one pair of closed parentheses, and here you have nested pairs of parentheses, each of which is closed, so each opening parenthesis is closed. On the other hand, here is an example of parentheses that are not balanced. So here there is no matching open parenthesis for this closing parenthesis. Here's another example which might be a little bit trickier, where you have the right number of opening parentheses and closing parentheses, but they're not matched. So this parenthesis is not matched with this parenthesis because they are in the wrong order. So that's not balanced, and that's not balanced. But this is balanced if you think about it. So okay, how would I do that? So here's the first idea, and that's the kind of idea which is best implemented using a loop. So the idea is this. I'll just go parenthesis by parenthesis, and I'll have a counter in which I'll figure out whether at any point in time I have more opening parentheses than closing parentheses. And then if I never have at any point more closing parentheses than opening parentheses, and at the end I have the same numbers of opening and closing parentheses, then I'm good. So here's an example of how that would go. I would say, okay, so here I have one opening parenthesis, I'm good. I have two opening parentheses. Now one of the parentheses got closed, so now I have one open parenthesis. And now I have 2, 3, 4. Now I closed one, so I have 3. And now I have 2, now I have 1, and now I have 0. So every open parenthesis got closed eventually by a closed parenthesis, which means that the expression is balanced. Here's an example where this would not work out. 1, now 0, and now minus 1. So that's a negative number in total, which means that there's more closing parentheses than opening parentheses, which means that that's not going to work out. Here's another example. Here I have minus 1 and now 0, so that would work out, except that at this point I had minus 1 opening parenthesis because I closed an expression without actually ever opening it, so that's not balanced either. So let's implement that. So I'll have my variable called counter, which will count the number of closed parentheses and the number of open parentheses. So the number of open parentheses. Closed. And if at any point this counter becomes negative, then I know that my expression is not balanced. So it would be either a case like that or maybe a case like that. So here's what I would do. I would say for character in the string s, so I'll go through every character, and I'll say if the counter is at any point smaller than 0, I just return false. And now it's time to change the counter, so I'll say if c is an opening parenthesis, then I got to increment the counter, and if it's a closing parenthesis, like that, then I got to make the counter smaller by 1. So minus equals 1. So once I've reached the end, my goal is to have the same number of opening and closing parentheses. So I'll just return counter is equal to 0. So that would return true if counter is equal to 0, and otherwise it would return false.